The Broken Blueprint, Part 3, 1910, Entering the Crisis. Confirming Statements in 1910. We now come to 1910, the year that marked the beginning, even though slow, of what snowballed into a dramatic changeover at Loma. The following 1905 statement, reprinted at the beginning of 1910, concerned Kellogg's earlier attempts to have Battle Creek College achieve AME accreditation. The so-called higher education of the present day is a misnamed deception. All this higher education that is being planned will be extinguished, for it is spurious. The more simple the education of our workers, the less connection they have with the men whom God is not leading, the more will be accomplished. EGW, Series B, Number 7, page 63, November 1905, Lake Union Herald, January 26, 1910. In the spring of 1910, the fateful year that the move toward changeover at Loma first began, Ellen White wrote an urgent letter to Elder Burden, warning him that our medical work, including Loma, must not confederate with worldly organizations and should not seek to meet their standards. The Lord has shown us the evil of depending upon the strength of earthly organizations. He has instructed us that the commission of the medical missionary is received from the very highest authority. He would have us understand that it is a mistake to regard as most essential the education given by physicians who reject the authority of Christ, the greatest physician who ever lived upon the earth. We are not to accept and follow the view of men who refuse to recognize God as their teacher, but who learn of men and are guided by man-made laws and restrictions. During the night of April 26, many things were opened before me. I was shown that now, in a special sense, we as a people are to be guided by divine instruction. Those fitting themselves for medical missionary work should fear to place themselves under the direction of worldly doctors, to imbibe their sentiments and peculiar prejudices, and to learn to express their ideas and views. They are not to depend for their influence upon worldly teachers. They should be looking to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. EGW, April 27, 1910. It is not necessary that our medical missionaries follow the precise track marked out by the medical men of the world. They do not need to administer drugs to the sick. They do not need to follow drug medication in order to have influence in their work. The message was given that if they would consecrate themselves to the Lord, if they would seek to obtain under men ordained of God a thorough knowledge of their work, the Lord would make them skillful. Connected with the divine teacher, they will understand that their dependence is upon God and not upon the professedly wise men of the world. Some of our medical missionaries have supposed that a medical training according to the plans of worldly schools is essential to their success. To those who have been taught that the only way to success is by being taught by worldly men and pursuing a course that is sanctioned by worldly men, I would now say, put away such ideas. This is a mistake that should be corrected. It is a dangerous thing to catch the spirit of the world. The popularity which such a course invites will bring into the work a spirit which the Word of God cannot sanction. The medical missionary who would become efficient, if he will search his own heart and consecrate himself to Christ, may be diligent in study and faithful in service, and learn how to grasp the mysteries of his sacred calling. EGW, April 27, 1910. Here is an earlier statement. Never are we to rely upon worldly recognition and rank. Never are we, in the establishment of institutions, to try to compete with worldly institutions in size or splendor. The great desires of the managers of our sanitariums should be so to walk in obedience to the Lord that all the helpers connected with these institutions can by faith walk with God as did Enoch. The Lord will guide all who humbly walk with him. Humble men who trust in him will be the most successful workers in his cause. We shall gain the victory, not by erecting massive buildings in rivalry with our enemies, but by cherishing a Christ-like spirit of meekness and lowliness. Medical Ministry, page 158, and Manuscript 109, 1902. We should instead obtain special certification. In the very same letter quoted above, we were told this: "Now, while the world is favorable towards the teaching of the health reform principles, moves should be made to secure for our own physicians the privilege of imparting medical instruction to our young people who would otherwise be led to attend the worldly medical colleges. The time will come when it will be more difficult than it is now to arrange for the training of our young people in medical missionary lines." EGW, April 27, 1910. It was part of the blueprint that we were to seek to obtain special state certification for our schools. The reason why we should receive that certification would be the blessing of God and the outstanding success of our work. You will recall that the lengthy 1908 burden letter to Rubel, quoted earlier, said this: "A good, thorough school of hygiene or rational practice would have no difficulty of being recognized in this state." And should our school be recognized here, its students would have a vantage ground from which to secure recognition in other states, the same as osteopaths are being recognized. Their healing art is fast being recognized in all the states, but they have had to fight their way to the front with everything against them. Their opening the way will evidently make it easier, for a time at least, for other reputable methods of healing to become recognized. Burden letter to W.A. Rubel, April 13, 1908. At that time, we were told to press our way forward and obtain special certification in every state, based on the sheer excellence of our method of treatment. But if we did not do so, inspiration warned, the time will come when it will be more difficult than it is now to arrange for the training of our young people in medical missionary lines. EGW, April 27, 1910. Testimonies Volume 9 covered the period from 1904 to 1909 and was published that year. It contained important letters sent to our leaders. In the work of the school, maintain simplicity. No argument is so powerful as is success founded upon simplicity. You may attain success in the education of students as medical missionaries without a medical school that can qualify physicians to compete with the physicians of the world. Let the students be given a practical education. The less dependent you are upon worldly methods of education, the better it will be for the students. Special instruction should be given in the art of treating the sick without the use of poisonous drugs, and in harmony with the light that God has given. In the treatment of the sick, poisonous drugs need not be used. Students should come forth from the school without having sacrificed the principles of health reform or their love for God and righteousness. The education that meets the world standard is to be less and less valued by those who are seeking for efficiency in carrying the medical missionary work in connection with the work of the third angel's message. They are to be educated from the standpoint of conscience, and as they conscientiously and faithfully follow right methods in their treatment of the sick, these methods will come to be recognized as preferable to the methods to which many have become accustomed, which demand the use of poisonous drugs. Testimonies for the Church, Volume 9, page 175. Raymond Moore tells us of non-Adventist religious colleges which, due to the sheer excellence of their schools combined with a determination not to yield to the demands of accrediting agencies, have remained in splendid independence of operation. Canada's McGill University determined never to sacrifice its ideals for recognition by institutions or government. It has become one of the world's great schools. Brigham Young University determined initially to hold high standards of morality at all costs. Its pattern was held consistently. Its growth and influence are now generally regarded as phenomenal. Boston's Northeastern University has clung to its now famed cooperative work-study program regardless of ridicule by elitists. Today, it is one of the largest and most reputable of America's institutions. A visitor to Warren Wilson College in North Carolina finds teachers and students working several hours together daily in manual labor. Its campus is remarkably devoid of troubles which bedevil most educational institutions. Raymond Moore, Adventist Education at the Crossroads, page 27. In September 1909, Elder Burden journeyed to Emshaven to ask Ellen White some questions. Elder Burden: Would the securing of a charter for a medical school where our students might obtain a medical education militate against our depending upon God? E.G. White: No, I do not see that it would, if a charter were secured on the right terms. Only be sure that you do not exalt men above God. If you can gain force and influence that will make your work more effective, without tying yourselves to worldly men, which membership in an accrediting association would require, that would be right. J.A. Burden: In planning our course of study, we have tried to follow the light in the testimonies, and in doing so, it has led us away from the requirements of the world. We shall have to stand distinct by ourselves. E.G. White: You may unite with them in certain points that will not have a misleading influence, but let no sacrifice be made to endanger our principles. We shall always have to stand distinct. God desires us to be separate, and yet it is our privilege to avail ourselves of certain rights. Example, a charter secured on the right terms. But rather than to confuse our medical work, you had better stand aloof and labor with the advantages that you yourselves can offer. You must arrange this matter as best you can. But the principle that is presented to me is that you are not to acknowledge any power as greater than that of God. Our influence is to be acknowledged by God because we keep His commandments. John Burden interview with E.G.W., September 20, 1909. Ellen White said that it would be safe to obtain a state charter for a school, as long as it did not in any way influence how we carried on our training and work. In answer to specific questions by Elders J.A. Burden and W.C. White, Mrs. White, in this interview, stated without hesitation that we should have a school of our own to educate physicians. She also agreed that it would not be a violation of principle to secure a charter. If you can gain force and influence, she said, that will make your work more effective without tying yourselves to worldly men, that would be right. E.G.W., Manuscript 71, 1909. D.E. Robinson, Story of Our Health Message, page 383. On October 13, 1909, the General Conference Committee approved that action, and on December 9, a charter was secured from the state of California to grant degrees in the liberal arts and sciences, dentistry, and medicine. The above statements explain that some must be qualified statements, which some stumble over. Elder John Burden knew that the spirit of prophecy counsels on the matter. Recall again his letter of 1908, quoted earlier, to W.A. Rubel at the General Conference. Here is a portion. Our understanding of the testimonies is that while thousands are to be quickly qualified for thorough medical evangelistic work, some must qualify to labor as physicians. We have been instructed again and again to make the school as strong as possible for the qualification of nurses and physicians. John Burden, letter to W.A. Rubel, April 13, 1908. In later years, Dr. Owen S. Parrott wrote this. My wife recalls, while we nurses were in training at Loma Linda, Elder Burden would often tell us, you should not desire to become registered nurses in the world's way. See Testimonies for the Church, Volume 1, page 127, Testimonies for the Church, Volume 6, pages 126 to 127, Medical Ministry, pages 61 to 62, and Fundamentals of Christian Education, pages 534 to 536, for a superior ministry of healing. Repeatedly, he reminded us that the College of Medical Evangelists was established to provide a superior method of education and a superior method of practice for nurses and physicians, and that our legal recognition was to be for a superior order, unique and separate from the regular training and recognition of the world's medical fraternities. God did not want us to become regular nurses and regular doctors. Burden's collection of Loma Linda messages contains several letters and interviews bearing this out. Repeatedly, Elder Burden told us medical students, Sister White tells me that the Lord will give us recognition when we are ready for it. Owen S. Parrott, M.D., Recollection of Experiences at Loma Linda in 1909. God's plan was that recognition would come. not as a result of seeking acceptance by accrediting agencies in accordance with worldly standards, but because our method of healing the sick would prove to be so much more successful, both immediately and in its long-term effects on the patients. The meaning of certain statements. Ellen White had stated that we should provide a complete education in medical missionary work for our students at Loma Linda. In many letters, some of which are quoted in this book, she repeatedly told what education consisted of. The type of education she urged was quite obvious. It included both medical and evangelistic training without the use of medicinal drugs. In strong contrast, in order to be accepted by the worldly accreditation agencies, Loma Linda would be forced to add many things, including drug medication, with which we should not become involved. Writing about the medical work, she earlier said, God does not at one time send a message of warning and later another message encouraging a movement against which he had previously given warning. His messages do not contradict one another. Cautions have been given that should cause our brethren to stop and consider their course. EGW, October 2, 1905, Series B, number 5, page 45. In 1932, Elder A.G. Daniels, in a Loma Linda chapel talk, quoted in Review, March 31, 1932, stated that years before, when he was president, he feared that Elder Burden was about to involve the denomination in serious financial difficulties in his efforts to start a medical school. But, Elder Daniels continued, Ellen White had mentioned in one statement that a complete medical school for training missionary physicians was needed. So, in 1910, as Daniels explained, he assumed that a regular medical college was what Ellen White wanted us to pursue. Here is that quotation that Elder Daniels was referring to. We should have, in various places, men of extraordinary ability who have obtained their diplomas in medical schools of the best reputation, who can stand before the world as fully qualified and legally recognized physicians. Let God-fearing men be wisely chosen to go through the training essential in order to obtain such qualifications. They should be prudent men who will remain true to the principles of the message. These should obtain the qualifications and the authority to conduct an educational work for our young men and our young women who desire to be trained for medical missionary work. Now, while the world is favorable towards the teaching of the health reform principles, moves should be made to secure for our own physicians the privilege of imparting medical instruction to our young people who would otherwise be led to attend the worldly medical colleges. The time will come when it will be more difficult than it is now to arrange for the training of our young people in medical missionary lines. EGW, Manuscript 61, 1910, quoted in the Medical Evangelist, June 1910. What does this one statement mean? It is clear that it appears to run counter to repeated statements by Ellen White that we are not to accreditate Loma Linda. What is the meaning of this statement which Elder Daniels ran with? Read the statement again. It does not say that any of our schools should be accredited. It does not say that Loma Linda should seek accreditation. It does not repudiate any of her other statements in regard to our health, healing, educational, and missionary work. What it does say is that a few of our men who have extraordinary ability should attend outside universities and obtain medical MD degrees so they can be stationed here and there throughout our institutions and at Loma Linda, so that the world cannot say that none of our men have the highest qualification. That's all it says. It does not say that Loma Linda or any other of our schools should obtain institutional accreditation. In order to initially staff our medical facilities, a few men had to have advanced training, but thereafter they could train our own students who would become the teachers in our medical schools. The statement above was quoted from Manuscript 61, 1910. Here are two other statements in the same manuscript, just a few paragraphs earlier. It is not necessary that our medical missionaries follow the precise track marked out by the medical men of the world. They do not need to administer drug medication in order to have influence in their work. The message was given me that if they would consecrate themselves to the Lord, if they would seek to obtain under men ordained of God a thorough knowledge of their work, the Lord would make them skillful. Connected with the divine teacher, they will understand that their dependence is upon God and not upon professedly wise men of the world. Some of our medical missionaries have supposed that a medical training according to the plans of worldly schools is essential to their success. To those who have thought that the only way to success is by being taught by worldly men and by pursuing a course that is sanctioned by worldly men, I would now say, put away such ideas. This is a mistake that should be corrected. It is a dangerous thing to catch the spirit of the world. The popularity which such course invites will bring into the work a spirit which the word of God cannot sanction. The medical missionary who would become efficient if he will search his own heart and consecrate himself to Christ may be diligent in study, faithful in service, and learn how to grasp the mysteries of his calling. At Loma, at Washington, at Warunga, Australia, and in many other sanitariums established in the promulgation of the work of the third angel's message, there are to come to the physicians and to the teachers new ideas, a new understanding of the principles that must govern the medical work. An education is to be given that is altogether in harmony with the teachings of the Word of God. EGW, Manuscript 61, 1910. Those who do not believe the Word of God cannot possibly present to those who desire to become acceptable medical missionaries the way by which they will become most successful. Christ was the greatest physician the world ever knew. His heart was ever touched with human woe. He has a work for those to do who will not place their dependence upon worldly powers. God's true commandment-keeping people will be instructed by him. The true medical missionary will be wise in the treatment of the sick, using the remedies that nature provides. And then he will look to Christ as the true healer of diseases. The principles of health reform brought into the life of the patient, the use of nature's remedies, and the cooperation of divine agencies in behalf of the suffering will bring success. EGW, Manuscript 61, 1910. There is a second comment by Ellen White that men have run with. Whatever our young people preparing to be physicians need to know, that we must prepare to teach. EGW, statement made at Mountain View Conference, January 27, 1910. Quoted in The Medical Evangelist, October to November issue, 1911, page 32. Elder William C. White was well acquainted with his mother's concepts, and he provided this explanation of that statement. Our medical missionaries should be given the opportunity to know the very best things done by the allopaths, those following the system accredited by the AMA Council on Medical Education and Association of American Medical Colleges, the eclectics, the homeopaths, the osteopaths, and the water cure doctors, but none of these systems should be adopted as the sign of our order. Neither are our medical men to give the credit or honor of the results of their labors under God to any man or group of men, or to any locality, or to any system. W.C. White, statement quoted in The Medical Evangelist, October to November issue, 1911. As we will learn shortly, it was only 2 years later that A.G. Daniels deeply regretted having assumed that the college should push ahead toward accreditation. More on this later. Why did God permit this changeover from 1910 to 1922 to occur? He tests men to see what they will do with the light shining upon them. The spirit of prophecy statements were clear, very clear, and there were dozens of them, dating back to the 1860s. Her counsels had not changed. But some men chose to grab at a pretext and run with it. It was because they did this that later in the early 1930s, our other colleges also demanded that they be permitted to apply for accreditation. More on this later. As a result, every one of our colleges are now accredited, all because it was a few men who decided that Loma must receive full worldly accreditation, in accordance with standards of instruction set by unbelievers. There are definite instances in the Bible and in church history in which men have determined to have their way, and so the Lord let them do it. This is a warning to us individually today. When Owen S. Parrott decided to leave the University of Southern California Medical School in 1907 and attend Loma Linda, the dean, Dr. Charles Bryson, was shocked that he would go to that hayseed farm for medical instruction. Just why then are you anxious to leave this university and go back to Loma Linda? He queried. Because the College of Evangelists emphasizes the importance of proper diet, natural methods of treatment, practical outdoor exercise, temperance, and other laws of health, which I need to know in order to best help the sick. Very well, he replied, but it takes more than that to make a medical college. And truly it does. It takes much trust in divine power to transform men's lives. But USC did not have that attribute. Dr. O.S. Parrott, undated statement. 1910 was the year of transition. In April 1906, Warren E. Howell became the first president of the Loma Linda College. But after 1 year, this very staunch advocate of the blueprint was sent by leadership as a missionary to Greece. That occurred at a time when his help was deeply needed at Loma Linda. In the spring of 1907, George Knapp Abbott, MD, took his place. Abbott was also faithful to the blueprint in regard to treatments. But since he obtained his degree in an outside university, he was not as clear about accreditation. From 1910 onward, Elder Burden, Ellen White's most faithful friend at Loma Linda, was steadily pushed into the background, and men trained in worldly universities gradually took control. Within 4 years, they had driven CME into heavy debt.